Well, this is the closing session, and the purpose of this session is basically to hear from you. So, all right. All right. Can you hear now? Is the sound up? Can everybody hear? The mic is not on.
Yeah, they're dead. Mics are dead. No, they're dead.
Now, is that better?
Is this
No,
one
they're
working?
dead.
No?
They're not.
They're not.
There it
no.
goes. No.
Let there be sound. No, no. First of all, on behalf of the International Institute for Secular Humanistic Judaism, we want to thank you, the audience, for being here. And what we'd like to do is to have an opportunity to bring this to a close by also hearing your voice. First of all, I think it'd be interesting to find out where people are from. First of all, are there... I know there were people here. Is Ian here from Australia? Yeah. Stand up, please. He's outside. All right. Australia was here.
Down under.
All right. We have from Mexico, Nati. You stand up. Give a hand to Mexico. And also from Latin America, we have from Uruguay. That's great. Anybody else? And your wife, where is she? I thought she was sitting here. That's great.
My wife?
Yes, is she here?
She left.
Okay, fine. Great. And now we have also, I know, from other places. From England, we have the Posens, but they're gone. Raise your hand if you're from a country outside the United States of America or Canada right now. If not, all those from Canada, please rise. I want you to know that the name of our region it's the North American section. We always say North America. We recognize that it's not just the United States, it's equal. Oh, Galiciano. And now, in terms of the United States, all those who are from the West Coast, would you please stand? Give them a hand. We're gonna have the Israelis. All those from the East Coast, that's east of the Appalachians, please stand. Give them a hand. All those from the new Mecca of the Jewish people, the South or Southwest. And all those from the Midwest, please stand, including Michigan. Give them all a hand. Okay. And as I was reminded, Israel is not part of North America. Will all those from Israel please rise? That's great. We've had a really nice assembly of people from all over the world who are here, and that's very, very exciting. So what I'd like to do is the panel of the Colloquium has spoken, and again, I want to express on behalf of the Institute our personal gratitude to all of you for coming. And I would like to invite you, if there's any final comment you would like to make make it now, a comment addressed certainly to each of us and to the audience in general. All right, fine. I just won? Okay, I'm going to call names.
Ordinarily, I wouldn't do this, but this is a conference of record, video, audio, okay, so forth. So if... Pardon? Oh, granted, yes. If you will indulge me, it'll take about...
Thank yous?
Yeah.
I was going to... right, go on.
Well, this is a list for me, and Sherwin can add, but I just feel constrained to mention some names or categories, including the speakers and the faculty. I thank them very much for what they have done this weekend. It's been very exciting, and I just want to recite Connie, Tracy, Libby, Lorraine, Paula, Nancy, Bill, Anton, Jeff, Bonnie, Larry, Judy, Ross, Lana, Helen, the Weisbergs, the Rosenhauses, Sherwin, Janice, Marilyn, and all the volunteers. I think you have to understand that the volunteers who sold the books and so forth can be characterized by Milt Landau standing in the parking lot last night in a gale wearing ear flaps, guiding you in. And that's the kind of spirit that has made this event possible.
I just wanted to give a very special thanks to somebody very special who was really responsible for the exhibition getting on its feet, or better, hanging on the walls. It's Hank Gluckman. Is he still here?
And there were many people who helped, but I wanted to call on the people who devoted extraordinary amounts of time to make this colloquium possible. First, the director of the International Institute for Secular Humanistic Judaism, who is one of the longest-run volunteers in the history of our movement. Marilyn Rowans, will you please stand, Ray? And I want to thank Paula Weinberg, where's Paula? Paula, because her efforts were extraordinary in terms of making this colloquium possible. And along with Paula, indeed, is the work of our faculty member, Martin Koch. Would you please stand? Okay. I also want to thank the people who chaired the committee and were responsible for all the arrangements to make everybody comfortable. And that is Libby Sherman, would you please stand, and Lorraine Ernst. Lorraine Ernst, is Lorraine here? Great. And I want to thank all the volunteers. I don't have the time to thank you personally by name, but it's very, very important for you to recognize how important and valuable your contribution has been to the success of this colloquium. I also would like, is Ross Lerner here? All right. Well, he's responsible for the extraordinary advertising we had, and that was a wonderful gift. And is Judith Byrne here? Yeah, please stand in charge of publicity. That's really great, all the work. And there were dozens of other people who contributed their special efforts to the success of the colloquium. But what contributed to the success of the colloquium was you, the audience. And now I'd like to invite one person up here who, as I mentioned last night, was most responsible for making this colloquium possible, working devotedly ever since December of 1994, and her name, Nancy Silver Shallot. Will she come forward?
Thank you. I wanted to make a personal statement now. It's non-official business. I want to thank everyone for your important contributions to Colloquium 95. Important by your participation, your attendance, your support, your contributions, your eloquence. I personally have always celebrated, I'm sorry, I'm going to read this. I have always celebrated the achievement of Jewish scholars, artists, and heroes, Jewish heroes from afar. But in this last year, I have met the most extraordinary people I have ever known or read about. Some of them scholars, some of them artists, some of them my own personal heroes, and all of them famous and not famous, warm and generous, loving and forgiving, learned and curious, enthusiastic and welcoming. All of them Jews. I feel more connected to the Jewish family and Jewish vitality than I have ever felt in my entire life. I thank you for coming and making it possible. I thank you for addressing the important concern of our colloquium, the unaffiliated Jew. I believe that this dialogue will continue and now has a solid foundation from which to proceed. I thank you for coming, and I hope with all my heart that I will see you all at Colloquium 97. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. And I see she's sitting in the back row. Very important, because without her contribution, none of us most likely would be here. Connie Wolberg, would you please rise? Thank you. And now, let me describe the way that we're going to handle this period. We have our distinguished panel here, and you have all those questions you wanted to ask that you never had a chance to ask. Because of the limitation of time, if we have speeches, then we're never going to allow as many people to talk as possible. So turn your speech, if you have one, into a question, and address that question to anybody here on the panel, and we'll be glad to respond. And
we would like to speak. We would like to make our point without being interpreted, without being...
All right, fine. Then that's wonderful. So why don't we start with Birmingham, Alabama? No, yes, come on. Here, take a microphone here. Don't assume there's a microphone.
Thank you. I've enjoyed this meeting. I've been very stimulated by it, but I have 4 comments that I'd like to make, which I think bring out some of the limitations of what we've been listening to and the format. 4 comments, 2 dealing with the target population, and 2 dealing with the format of the colloquium itself. With respect to the target population, we've heard about the need for market research on these consumers who are unaffiliated. I've always been of the impression, and on the basis of my kind of career, that when you want to do good market research, you don't start with large-scale structured questionnaires. You start with in-depth studies of the people to be studied, and then you graduate from that carefully to a structured questionnaire of a mass type. If we want to know something about the unaffiliated, let's go out and ask them, not these kinds of questions that they have been, which are off the top of people's heads, but ask them questions based on their own comments with respect to who they are, what they are, and where they come from. Secondly, with respect to what you would find, I have a hypothesis of my own that if you really went to these people and asked them things about themselves, what you would find is that they have been struggling with competing ideologies. Jewish ideologies, Christian ideologies of the larger society, and then a more amorphous, at least in the United States, I've only lived here, a more amorphous ideology related to, say, American jurisprudence, the kind of ideology defined by our Constitution and by our laws, which I have come to recognize as a Jew have many, many roots out of Judaism. But I think that if you recognize that ideology, or that the conflicts in ideology as important, then you have to recognize that these people have also had problems in trying to determine how to handle ordinary, everyday kinds of life difficulties that they face, whether it's divorce, whether it's abortion, whether it's teenage sex, whether it's surrogate parenting, and so forth. And I think we need to recognize that if we're to go forward with Judaism, we have to give to these people a clear ideology, Jewish ideology, that helps them solve their everyday problems. Third, with respect to the colloquium format, it's great to have experts. I've been on those things myself. But the experts don't have the answers. They only can hypothesize. I think there has been insufficient interaction between the experts and the audience to date. This is a highly sophisticated, educated, knowledgeable, experienced audience, highly articulate. And I think we can address questions to them and get interaction that would have been much more fruitful than what we had. A last point. As I look around at the invited speakers, what I gathered when I first walked in was, my gosh, all these alta cups. And not only that, but so few women. There were very few young experts and very few women, and I think there needed to have been more. Thank you.
All right, Morris, will you want to speak to him?
Okay. Baruch shehechiyanu v'kiyamanu l'yom rishon, Sunday. I'm happy that we've lived through this, and now it is Sunday, and we may speak. I've spent 2.5 days listening to brilliant people speak to me, and Kepatish Yefrotzeit Sela, when they said things, it made me think, and I had to sit here mute. I hope that at the next colloquium, you make provision for participation from the floor. Otherwise, we were just here, and we didn't get to say what we wanted to say. I have so many things that I want to say, and of course I cannot say it. So I won't, and I will end up by telling you a joke. When I was a youngster, I used to say, I thank God that he didn't make me a woman. And I always objected to it, and I didn't understand. But this morning when I went to the men's room and I looked at the line in front of the women's room, I understood it.
All right, yes. Well, take the mic, give the microphone.
I shouldn't be able to project in the room without it. Jewish affluence is not a sin, but how you use Jewish affluence can be the greatest sin of all. On all the boards that I've ever seen, I never see a Yiddish Kapsen sitting on the board. A poor Jew. I'm sorry, I thought everybody was a Yiddishist. Now, one of the greatest fundraisers we have in the United States is probably the UGA. I've given up fighting with them on their percentage distributions. I've always maintained Israel is tremendously important to me. However, if we don't find a way of continuing a Jewish active community at home, we'll have nothing to send to Israel later. How do we convince our affluent Jews that there are poor Jews that cannot afford to affiliate, that want to affiliate, and those that belong find themselves in economic status, they have to drop out because they can't afford to remain? How do we solve this problem?
That's one of the issues that was raised, and it simply means that ultimately, hopefully, the establishment will be able to respond to creative efforts on the part of people who are doing things to reach out to the unaffiliated. Yes.
Abe Arnold from Winnipeg. I'm the Canadian representative that comes from the furthest west. The others here, I believe, are all from Toronto. We do have secular humanistic Jewish groups in Montreal. Toronto is the most vibrant. In Winnipeg, in Vancouver, and there's a new Society of Humanistic Judaism group in Victoria. I noted that Norman Cantor, who left Winnipeg, I think before I got there, raised the question of charisma again this morning, which I would have asked a question on, but I think the answers were given about charisma. But I want to say that in Canada, I think we're in a post-charisma stage since the retirement of Pierre Elliott Trudeau. And I suppose I have to confess that my main reason for being here is that I've produced a book, the first book on Judaism from a secular humanist perspective ever published in Canada. There are sheets out in the hall, and some people have copies here. And I've appreciated the opportunity to come here and to be part of this colloquium and to meet many people from all over the country. And especially, I've made friends on the West Coast. Well, I used to live in Vancouver, so, but the people on the West Coast have been very friendly to me. I would conclude with the following. A rabbi in Toronto, a Reformed rabbi, reviewed my book in the Canadian Jewish News, and he had the nerve to call me an atheist. I wrote a response which was published in the paper. I won't give you the whole response, but what I said was, I prefer to be known as an Epicurus. I appreciate the opportunity of having been here, and I thank Rabbi Wein. It's been a great colloquium. I go back re-inspired and confirmed in my views as a secular Jew for 50 years.
Ruth and then Roz and then Bobby. Ruth. And Roz, then Bobby.
As somebody who's been in the movement for humanistic Judaism and now secular humanistic Judaism for probably almost 30 years, if I'm counting correctly, I think the most significant fact of this weekend is not all of the brilliant things that we heard and agreed with and disagreed with, as exciting as they were, but just the fact that it took place. It was said that being Jewish, the essence of being Jewish is being in exile. Those of us who are humanistic Jews perhaps have felt especially in exile, in that our main contact in the early years with people in what is called mainstream Judaism was the question that we constantly heard, almost as if it was part of the liturgy: how can you be Jewish if you don't believe in God? I hope that this weekend, if nothing else, has begun to answer the question, that there is a way of being Jewish without believing in God. I also hope that perhaps, I wanted to bring up my one major response to the weekend and ask it as a question if anyone has a response. And that is that it seems to me that the Jewish consumer, the unaffiliated consumer that we've been hearing about so much, the problem is that this person is probably never going to affiliate in the sense of joining, contributing to, supporting the kinds of services that we think he or she needs and that we should provide. And therefore, I think the problem boils down to one of funding. We have many ideas for what we could do to serve the unaffiliated. The question is, who will pay for it? And as long as those of us who are trying to do this are out in the wilderness somewhere and have limited resources, it won't happen. I think the real issue is when and to what extent and whether establishment philanthropy, Jewish philanthropy, will be willing to fund options within Judaism which are contrary to the ones that they have supported in the past. And I'd like to hear any response to that.
Is there any response? Charles?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the most powerful part of the weekend for me has been getting an understanding of the authenticity of this movement within Judaism. The fact that it may not be what speaks to me is irrelevant. And I found, despite the criticisms I've implied or suggested, Friday night was a very moving experience. The passion with which the graduates spoke, the feeling that was physically evident in the room made it clear that this is a source of meaning. And ultimately, I think we remain Jewish because it provides some sense of meaning in our lives. So I found it an enormously rewarding experience.
Hi, I'm Roz Hill, and I'm a member of the second oldest congregation in this movement. It's in Fairfield County, Connecticut. And I have just two things I wanted to talk about. I don't know if those of you who saw me sitting back there might have noticed that my 20-year-old daughter was here with me, and this is really addressed to Mr. Cantor, who asked the question of where are the young people. She's a student at Columbia University. And I had to pay her registration and her airfare here, and she had to miss 2 days of class to be here with us to start on Thursday and to fly out here. And so that's where some of them are. They are very committed young people in this movement, and I know the children of other members of our congregation who were raised in our congregation. The comment I'd like to make is to address the question of the intermarried. Our congregation has had wild success with the intermarried, and I just share this for whatever it's worth. I think when you are truly welcoming to the spouse of an intermarried Jew, you find that they begin to realize that they are fully accepted and they begin to participate with you. And that is when they find their meaning in the organization and in Judaism. Because it is until somebody really feels welcome in an absolutely non-judgmental and accepting way that they can begin to participate. And it's in the participation, in the sense of community, which they then feel with the group, that they become Jewish.
Great. Bobby?
First, I have a comment, but I really do have a question. And the comment is that I think I share in the opinion of most of the people here that we are delighted to have been able to be in this austere company. And we're particularly delighted that the people on the dais have certainly heard us in a lot of different ways. And the fact that we've exchanged some information about each other, I think, has been one of the most wonderful things about the weekend. Now, my question is this for the people on the podium. As you probably have figured out by this weekend, the synagogue model is not typical of the thousands of households that are in our movement. The Society for Humanistic Judaism has a few synagogues in its 20 or 30 communities. The Congress of Secular Jewish Organizations has no synagogue or congregational models with a titular leader. But we've commented a lot this weekend on the synagogue model. And in fact, if I may quote Mr. Cantor, he says, Jews born after 1945 discovered themselves to be atheists in search of a synagogue. I would like to hear comments about whether or not you feel that the future of this movement rests in this kind of model, or if some of the other approaches of Havarot, book groups, and communities, adult education communities, will also work as well and will capture the interest of the unaffiliated.
Since I have to run for an airplane, my last comment in response to that question is, I now am much more convinced, and it's by hearing your voices, even though you were disenfranchised from much of the larger dialogue. We heard you at the meeting, at the tables when we sat together, and in the halls. And that respect is, the Jewish community needs to have a range of resources, and that there are many people who are tilting either in or out, and having the resource of your kinds of congregations offers an opportunity for people who we otherwise would surely lose, and it's a threshold to make it accessible for them, as the prior speaker mentioned, to find a non-judgmental, truly accepting place where they can come in and not be lectured to about their having done a terrible thing. So you guys have to hang in. Ultimately, we will all be the beneficiaries of those unaffiliated who you are going to bring in, who will be fine members of our community.
Jane, and then we'll... yes, you're next. And then Zev, and then Eva, and then Lily, okay?
I don't want to take up time with saying all the things I could say about the weekend. I'm just going to say it's been great. I'm Jane Goldhammer from Portland, Oregon. We have a 2-year-old community. We have about 60 people who are quite active. I can't speak yet to how we are going to do on retaining our youth because we're only 2 years old. But the people who come to us are people who say, this is the first time I have felt good about a way that I can express my Jewishness. I've wanted to belong. This is the first place I felt comfortable. They are bringing in their children, their little children, who without us, would have no exposure to Judaism whatsoever. And we are, regardless of whether we retain them or not, we are giving them an exposure, a happy experience with Judaism, which they will remember at least.
Next was, oh, that's right, please, thank you. Dr. Fruman.
Maybe I can do without the mic.
Everybody.
It's on the airplane.
Now you want to know why people don't use the internet? They won't even use a mic.
Okay, here it is. Here it is. My name is Morris Fruman. I'm a retired developmental. My name is Morris Fruman, and I'm a retired developmental physician. I want to read from a letter that I sent to the Jewish News, which was never published. The letter, in essence, was an effort to encourage attendance at this conference because of the writings of Norman Cantor, who I had been most impressed with. The letter was never published, and I believe the origin of this may be some lack of support for your movement. So it begins, for the past decade, the Jewish community has been concerned with the problems of identity and affiliation. I have two suggestions to offer to complement those of the Commission which has studied this problem, and I do have a suggestion to make concerning your efforts. I personally do not have any special efforts at proselytizing. In September of 1985, the Jewish Welfare Federation announced the formation of a Commission on Jewish Identity and Affiliation. A group of 112 were involved with David Page as chairman and issued a report in June of 1989. A large number of recommendations were made for action concerning education, Israel, family life, teens, and quality of life. The issue of identity was not specifically addressed. I don't think this conference did so either, because identity is a psychological term, and there were many sociologists, and I'm afraid they didn't approach it that way. But that's a point of view. Because the commission had already been established, I was not a participant. The subject was of personal interest to me, and so I began a study of my own. This study included readings of Mr. Cantor, Potok's Wandering Jew, Paul Johnson's The History of the Jews, Ruth Gay's History of Jews in Germany, Warburg's story of his family, the Rothschilds, and most recently a book by Eric Kohler, an historian, a German Jew who came to this country in the 40s. Now, born of Jewish parents, and I want to establish my own position, born of Jewish parents and raised in an area of Detroit where I was identified as a Yid, I was bar mitzvahed at 13, and as happened with my brother, my father chose not to attend. A number of relatives nevertheless referred to me as Mernish V'Agoy. So from the age of 13, the problem of Jewish identity was confused. I still remain marginally affiliated, and I'll explain that. Our children all receive conventional Jewish education and are members of synagogues. Apparently, my children turned out to be more Jewish than I by some views. Now, as to my Jewish identity, I am born of Jewish parents. I was bar mitzvahed.
Dr. Fruman, there has to be a response to the colloquium. It can't be a discussion, a complete discussion of Jewish identity. Can you bring it to a conclusion?
Yes, I will.
Okay, thank you.
I find, as a result of this conference, which I respect, because it has come to the conclusions that are very much similar to my own. Those conclusions include the sense of identity, as I've described them, and my own formal identity, which is as a member of the Jewish Community Center Health Club. I'm therefore identified as a Jew by these criteria. Now, as to your efforts, and I have no interest in the idea of promoting Judaism other than to the extent that my family.
Doctor, we have to bring...
I will finish. I will finish. All right. On the basis of what you are doing, I would suggest to you that you continue your efforts at education, as Dr. Cantor has suggested, by first beginning with the education of your rabbis, and then to foster education for people at the high school level, at the senior high school level, where providing them credits for their Jewish history education, they will have a benefit, as one of your discussants suggested, for coming to know their Jewish identity. There is an element that this conference has toyed with but fooled around with. I'm finished. Sit down. There is an element of that is involved for me, which has to do with transcendence. And I don't think anyone here really approached that. My transcendence occurs when I go to an Orthodox synagogue and I listen to the prayer. That's the distinguishing quality for me. I encourage education. Thank you.
Eva Goldfinger.
I thought Zeb was going to speak first. Thank you.
As much guard as you get.
I'll move forward. My name is Eva Goldfinger. I'm a madrich or madricha in the movement, and I'm from the Secular Jewish Association of Toronto, which is affiliated with the Congress of Secular Jewish Organizations, the sister organization of the SHA, for those of you who are not aware. Contrary to what Bobby indicated, in the CSJO we do have some congregational formats. Some of us are not lucky enough and rich enough to own our own buildings, so we don't have the place that Yaakov mentioned, but we would love to. There's only two things I would like to speak to beyond thanking everybody here. It has been very informative and energizing. One of them is the issue of intermarriage, and I want to reinforce what Roz had indicated. I personally have performed over 300 marriages, the majority of which, but not all, are between intermarried couples, interculturally married, some interreligiously married. Many of those, all of them are on the SJA mailing list. Many of those come to some of our events. Quite a few of them have now become members of our organizations. They come to us for Jewish education. They come to us for the baby namings. Now that some of their children are old enough to go to our school, some of them come back because they want to go to our school. So we have to begin with that open door policy towards the intermarried so we don't lose our own. And in fact, I want to report to you, and I want to share this with you, that there are at least 2 non-Jewish members of our organizations who now, when you ask them what they are, say Jewish. They have not officially converted, but they feel Jewish, they identify, and they're very involved in the perpetuation of secular humanistic Judaism. The other thing that I want to speak to very briefly is as an alternate concept to the synagogue model, because as Egon Mayer pointed out, not everybody will come to you, and not everybody needs or wants the Jewish community, although they want some kind of community. With the training of madrichim in our movement, who will go out, and madrichot, who will be going out into the community, we can create the service center. It can be a storefront. It can be run out of your home. It doesn't matter where. But people who require and want Jewish services like courses in Judaism, bar bat mitzvah lessons, a wedding, a funeral, or whatever, can come for those services. So at the time of their need, for whatever it might be, it will be fulfilled in a Jewish way. Thank you.
Before we have Lillian speak, I would like to mention the fact that 3 very important people are here that I'd like to acknowledge. First of all, the Executive Director of the Congress of Secular Jewish Organizations, Roberta Feinstein, recently graduated. Okay. And the Executive Director of the Society for Humanistic Judaism, Bonnie Cousins, who worked very hard to make this colloquium possible. We also have with us a very distinguished person who is still a leader and the former main leader of the Arbiter Ring, the Workmen's Circle. Will Stern, would you please stand? Thank you. Very important part of the secular Jewish movement today. And I also, Janice Levin-Gorelick just walked through the door. All right, fine. And I also, Michael Egren, without whose help this colloquium would not have taken place, and whose work during the course of it has been incredible. Thank you. All right. Before Lillian's, Ed, did you want to say something?
Yes.
Okay, great.
It just relates to...
Is Dana here? Oh, okay, great. The president of the Society for Humanistic Judaism, Dana Neymark from Phoenix, Arizona. Great. And she was raised in this congregation. I went out to help found the congregation in Phoenix.
Very briefly, we were asked whether the synagogue model is the only model in Israel. We haven't got synagogues, but I want to mention something I wouldn't otherwise come now to, which we didn't talk at all. How did the other Orthodox succeed? Because they made the home, the family, a place where you have a kiddush and you have lighting candles and you have Zmirot Shabbat, and every home, not without going or parallel to going to a synagogue or to a meeting or to something else. We need to develop such ceremonies. There are such ceremonies in the book by Sherwin. There are other materials that have been produced for home use, for a Shabbat, lighting candles, for a kiddush, for Zmirot, for readings, for various holidays. This would be a very important, and this is the only, maybe one of the best ways to impart it to children. So this kind of thing, which we haven't dealt with until now.
All right, we're going to listen to Lillian, and then Yehuda would like to say a few words. Then we're going to bring this to a conclusion. Thank you.
I'll try to be very short, although once I get a microphone, it's hard to do that. First of all, I want to say that I learned a lot from attending the colloquium, and I want to thank everybody who participated in any way from it. First, I'd like to give a little warning. As Sherwin knows, my field has always been the socialization of children. How do we learn the attitudes and values and behavior that people practice? Well, the people who are in developmental psychology and the other authorities, the physicians, find that we learn at an early age, and it's very difficult at a later age to dislodge any of those attitudes that are formed at a very early age. So one of the things we have to do is to reach younger children and to reach those people who are the caregivers and the mentors of younger children, because very often at high school it's too late. They're already thinking in terms of other things. So that's one problem. The second thing is how to build in participation. Unless there's some way to build in participation, I was raised in a Marxist household, and before the days of affluence, there were no babysitters. So if your parents went out to demonstrate on the picket line, you went right with them. So you learned at a very early age. And I learned even with my grandson, I once said to him, "What's the most important thing that I have helped you do?" And he said, "When we demonstrated against war toys at Toys R Us." And all the stories that I told him didn't mean a damn thing, but that did. And that took hold. And probably if there's one thing I can be proud of, it's that. So how can we begin to reach people who are the mentors and models? Because that's how people learn. Whether it's a teacher at fourth grade, it can be a teacher. Before then, it's the caregiver. After that, we have to deal with the media. And I couldn't say, agree more with the idea that we can't ignore the media. The media is now responsible in many cases for over 90% of a child's ability to learn and what he or she learns. And I think we have to be aware of that.
Great.
I have to bell a little because of you, Sherwin.
Lillian, we're about the same age, but she was my counselor in camp and one of my first teachers, and so it's a great joy to have her.
This has been a learning experience, and when they were discussing the question of how do you get people motivated to deal with the question of affiliation or any other relation with the Jewish community, the thought occurred to me that most of the people that I know affiliated here joined here because they learned something. They learned how to be an American and Jewish and combined them in such a way that you made both of them relevant to the experience and challenge of our stage in human history. And we're entering a new stage in human history. And while all of you people are most informed and able to speak well and engage our consciousness in a qualitatively higher level than when we entered this room, and I'm most appreciative to all those who engaged in that project, I'm not so sure we answer the question of why be Jewish. And I put this question to at least a dozen rabbis in this area, and the result has been a rather dismal one for me. I had hoped that I would have elicited the notion that there was a special learning residue in each one of us by being Jewish, a sense of social justice, a sense of community involvement in a realistic way, in a way of growing as an individual to be responsible for the Bill of Rights and the Constitution and all the ways in which democracy survives. And I don't think the issue of the survival of democracy has been answered once and for all. I think it faces a genuine challenge. It will be facing a genuine challenge tomorrow in Washington. There will be many challenges, and we're in a stage of globalization, of horizons which have to be lifted, and I'm not sure I know the answers. In fact, I am pretty sure I don't know the answers, and that's why I'm here. I'm part of an inquiring humanity, seeking to find my way to be a responsible human being in the 20th century. That's what's important. And we're all distinctly capable of guidance about that. Guidance from Judaism, guidance from all the teachers we've had and our experience, and what Lillian just said on the picket line, this action of struggle itself is the biggest learning experience. But what I am most disturbed about is that we don't yet have the way of making a full, responsible, meaningful life part of the human experience and the Jewish experience. The problems are momentous and will become more serious. But I have been trying to teach 35 years of law students about the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and I find that when they enter law school, they know very little about how they are responsible for the Constitution and they are responsible for the Bill of Rights, and that's the key word, responsibility. We have to.
Thank you very much. And now I'd like to turn the microphone over finally to Yehuda Bauer. Elaine, because of the time, I think we have to conclude. Yehuda, would you say a final word?
I think the last speaker actually said most of what I wanted to say, but I wanted to say it in form of an answer, not in form of a question. Because I think that what you presented, namely the quest, and you talked about the quest, that is the Jewish answer. The answer is not the answer to the question. The answer is the question. And I think that is a very specifically Jewish way of approaching things. Now, we don't have values, I don't think. I don't think there are Jewish values. I think that there are human values in Jewish clothes. And I think that the special Jewishness of the clothes is what attracts us, what gives meaning to our Jewishness. And that clothing is the transmission over thousands of years of a development that the content of which, the basis of which, is the question, the quest. And I think that if I were to put this in a succinct form, a clearly enunciated form, that is how I would put it. And I think that that is the only approach possible to the unaffiliated Jewish person. In this country, they live in a society where the race has to be, some brakes have to be applied to it. You run much too quickly. And the way, not of stopping, you can't stop a thing like that, but to stop and think, stop and consider, both cognitively, with reason, and also with emotion, is what this movement is doing. But as I said before, it's not the only way. There may be other ways. I'm sure there are other ways. And that ties into the question of synagogue or community or whatever. What does it matter what form it takes? Eva, you didn't mention the thing that you've been doing best, and that is schools. Herschel mentioned it before. The Congress of Secular Jewish Organizations was built around schools. Now, establish schools, elementary, high, whatever, and build around that a community or a community of interests, and fill that with the content you want, is fine. I think that is another way of doing exactly the same thing. And I believe that what we come away with from this colloquium is another very essential point. One of the last speakers said it. You know, if we talk to ourselves, it's no use. We have to find a way to burst through the wall of opposition, animosity, and just simple laziness, and strike through that to the only way that these things can be done. And you know, people say, so it's terribly expensive to build a TV program. You know, it's terribly cheap to create a program on internet. It's very cheap to confer with other people via computer. We now have these techniques. For heaven's sake, let's use them. Thank you.
What I'd like to do is to invite the members of this colloquium sitting here to give a great round of applause to our wonderful audience. Like every one of us, to give a round of applause to all of us for being here at this very, very special